So I went in, held the gun, opened the till. Assault on police, ABH, possession of a bladed weapon, multiple burglaries. They brought me back to life and I was put in a padded cell.
How does Feltham Young Offenders compare to the actual film Scum?
I want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Gold Seal. I use their products every single day, and now I finally get to work with them. I use their products for anti-inflammatory, reduced anxiety, better sleep, and mental clarity. I'm going to put a link to their website in the description, along with a 10% discount code for you to take advantage of. Go and have a look at their website, see if there's anything in there for you. I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and good health.
Michael.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me, Liam. It's good to be here.
I'm glad you're here. I needed someone like you today to be sat opposite me because there's a lot of darkness out there. There's a lot of misery, and to come from where you've come from and all the obstacles that you've overcome, I'll get it in this nice and early. Nothing but respect for me, which is why I'm absolutely delighted you're here, because I believe people will need to hear your voice today, will need to hear your story. It will help heal and soothe a lot of people, in particular men, because a lot of men don't like to talk about their feelings, or they don't really know how to make sense of stuff that's going on, because we're all very, my job is to protect, so I can't show any weakness. And the whole time you're doing that, you're sort of cracking inside. So let's get your backstory, because also people listening and watching, you're going to hear some pretty heavy, hard-hitting stories, but also the prison system. Michael is a walking authority, I would say, on the prison system, the failings, where it can improve. You've also got a charity, so you've dealt firsthand with victims and perpetrators of grooming gangs. So I just want to paint a little picture of what's to come, so people stick with this podcast, because this is education for people and a bit of self-help as well. So let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from originally?
If anyone's been to Twickenham Rugby Stadium, you see the big tower blocks. That's where I lived. I grew up in Isleworth there. Raised by my mum. My mum was we come from Irish traveller background. Surname is Mohan, and my mum immigrated here when she was 16. Met my dad, had me, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in Isleworth, predominantly raised by my mum, who, you know, she had her own battles with alcoholism and stuff like that. My dad left before I was one, and it was really raised by my mum most of my life. You know what I mean?
Same.
Yeah, but she was good, you know. Like Liam, when I look back at a woman who came to London for a better life, you know, hoping that she would find safety, security. She was sold a dream: the streets would be paved with gold, and she was met with, you know, signs on hotel doors that said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. You know, and yet she carried on. She worked in a hotel, and she just kept chipping away, kept going. You know what I mean? And yeah, she had her faults, but I think my mum, I give her a lot of credit for keeping going.
Give me a little bit of background on your mum's life, because I know that she didn't have an easy ride.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, my mum comes from an Irish traveller family. We're originally from County Mayo, and they travelled all around Ireland, and then they travelled up to the north. And when we was in the north of Ireland, it was under British occupation. It's still under British occupation. And the British Social Services came into the camp and saw, like, my mum and all her brothers and sisters walking around, you know, wild, barefoot, dirty, and was like, you know, these kids are malnourished. They've not been looked after properly. And they came back like heavy-handed and took all the kids under the age of 16. My mum was one of them. And, you know, it sounds awful, right? But it's what was done back then. You know, you had the right to come in and just take children and go and stick them in a children's home. My mum was moved to a children's home called Nazareth Lodge. You just put into Google Nazareth Lodge, you'll see the systematic physical and sexual abuse of children that happened in that place. You know, lots of, they're gauging it now. Hundreds of kids just disappeared, were just killed, never seen again. And a lot of the children in that home weren't just from traveller background. They were children from out of wedlock and stuff like that. As soon as my mum turned 16, she went to leave the home, and there was my grandparents, Tommy and Winnie, at the gates of the children's home saying, we're gonna marry you off to another travelling family, which back then was a way feuds were settled. You know, we kind of had a feud going with the McDonoughs and the Wards, and they was like, we're going to put this feud to bed. You're going to marry one of their sons, and now we're family, and now the feud is squashed. And so my mum kind of had enough wit about her to keep them at bay for long enough, and as soon as she had a chance, she took the money and got on the boat straight across to Liverpool, and then went to London from there.
And what about your dad's background?
He grew up in London, in Feltham. His father, my grandfather, served in World War II, lost loads of people there, came back from World War II with, you know, I suspect undiagnosed PTSD. We didn't even know what PTSD was back then. And he just created a war zone in his own home, drink, violence. And my dad's got 5 sisters, and, you know, my dad would get in the way when my grandfather was trying to beat the girls and beat my grandmother. And so my dad also had a very traumatic upbringing, you know, and it's interesting when you look at this story, Liam, and you see, you know, my mum ended up getting a job in the Cabbage Patch in Twickenham, which is quite a famous pub in Twickenham. And my dad would drink in there, and you get these two young adults from completely different parts of the world, but have both had traumatic childhoods, are somehow magnetically drawn to each other.
And that can go one of two ways, can't it?
Yeah, well, this is it, yeah. And I think my mum was looking for safety. I think my dad, you know, was probably, you know, blown away by my mum's long black hair and her Irish accent. And my dad was also, but he was very jealous. And so even while my mum was pregnant with me, he was violent to her. And the first year of me being my mum, when I was in my mum's belly, my mum often said, you know, like, we was constantly on the run. You know, I lived in 5 different homes before I turned 1. We was constantly on the move, constantly escaping him, because he would show up, he'd find her, and he'd get violent towards her, and then we'd move again, and women's shelters and all of this sort of stuff. And then eventually we settled on the Ivy Bridge Council Estate in Isleworth, which is where I spent most of my childhood. You know, on paper, you would look at a lot of the things that happened in my childhood before the age of 5. You would have said there was a lot of trauma. You know, there was a lot of neglect. There was a lot of stuff that happened that shouldn't have happened, right? But, you know, I didn't know any different. We grew up on a council estate where most of the people there were immigrants, you know. Most of the fathers were missing. Most of the mums were hungover most mornings and stressed out. Like, I didn't know any different. For me, that was the normal, you know. But the thing that really changed my whole view of the world would have been when my uncle came to visit. So my uncle, Tommy, he grew up in the same children's home. He was like a little baby when they took him in.
So this is your mum's brother?
This is my mum's brother, yeah.
Okay. And
so all he knew, and I'm not justifying what he'd done to me, but all he knew from a baby was physical and sexual abuse from the priests in the Catholic children's home, but also back then there wasn't DBS checks. So an advertisement would go in the local newspaper: we need someone to cut the grass. We need someone to play football with the kids. We need someone to teach piano, someone to teach English. What would happen? Paedophiles would just rock up. They'd have free range to all these kids in the children's home, right? And so that's all my Uncle Tommy knew from a baby. When he left the children's home, he called my mum up and said, Teresa, can I come and live with you? You know, I want to come to England. I want to make a fresh start. I want to get away from the traveller's life. Because, you know, back then and even now, you know, the travelling community is a marginalised group. You know, they're looked at often as like a problem that needs to be solved rather than a group of people that, you know, is like the rest of us, you know. But Tommy came to live with us, and that's where, for me, my whole view of the world changed.
How old was Tommy?
Tommy would have been about 16, 17.
And you was 5.
And I was 5, yeah. And
how old was your mum?
She would have been 26.
I'm just thinking, in my mind, was your mum taking on her brother, or was it almost like taking on a younger child?
Yeah, I think so. I think he was the youngest, and everyone loved him.
Because what your uncle went on to do to you, it would be hard to actually think that would be possible.
Well, this is the thing, is like, my mum took into the children's home. She was a bit older than everyone else. I think she was like 8 or 9 or something like that. so she always said, like, look, she didn't get the worst of it. She said the worst of it was when the kids who were taken in when they were like 1 year old, that's all they knew. Every day was just abuse. But I don't think my mum ever thought Tommy would do that to me. And so, you know, when it started, it was, you know, and again, I say this looking back in hindsight, having pulled it apart with therapy and all of this sort of stuff, that it was very confusing as a young boy, having your first, you hadn't even thought about sexuality, right? But having a first sexual experience with a man who everyone in your family loves and is also, I viewed as like a father figure, as a male role model who lived in my home. You know, it was confusing for me. And for me to try and make sense of it, and this might be hard for people to understand, right? But as a young 5-year-old boy, the way I had to make sense of it was either this is Tommy's fault, either Tommy's bad or Michael's bad. And so I started looking for evidence. Okay, what's the evidence that Tommy's bad? Well, you know, everyone loves Tommy. He's the youngest of all the brothers and sisters. Everyone loves him, you know. Okay, what's the evidence for Michael's bad? Well, your mum's an alcoholic. Your dad don't even want to know you. It must be you, mate. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe you deserve what's happened to you, right? Sounds crazy saying this, right? But it played out later on in life where anything good that came into my life, I tried to sabotage.
Rejected it.
Yeah, because I believed I didn't deserve it. Because deep down, I believed I was bad. I was tainted goods.
And what did your uncle do?
It started off with intimidation. It started off, if I was naughty, he would discipline me. But he disciplined me in a way that was way beyond what's deemed as normal.
Disproportionate.
Yeah, so back when I was about 3 years old, I woke up, everyone was still asleep in my house, and I went into the kitchen and I started playing on the floor with a tin opener. And I was playing with a tin opener, and anyway, at some point I just remember screaming and passing out, and the tin opener, I'd wrapped it around my testicles as a young 3-year-old boy. And I was hospitalised, and it was something that amongst the family, as crazy as this sounds, it was kind of laughed about. They were like, oh, God, remember that crazy time? He wrapped it up around his testicles. It was laughed about.
Did you need stitches?
Yeah, I went to hospital, and that was it. I was on the radar of social services. It was like, you know, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But that's the way that Tommy first disciplined me. He grabbed my testicles when I was 5. And that was how it started, was through this fear of like just terror of like, oh my God, being completely powerless, having no control over anything. And after that, it would, you know, he'd come into my room at night, and there was never penetration, but there was always just, you know, never knowing when he was going to come in. That was the hardest thing. It made me super sensitive to everything that was going on around me. Like, he always used to listen to an Irish band called the Wolf Tones. And I knew if I could hear the Wolf Tones playing, I'd get, and I used to hear Irish music all the time in my house because we come from an Irish traveller family, but I got to know some of the Wolf Tones songs. And I knew when that was playing, it meant Tommy's in there drinking, and that means he's going to come into my room.
Did you have any male role models at this stage?
No, there was no male role models at this stage, no.
So the only real male role model you had was your uncle that you're supposed to trust, but you absolutely couldn't. Yeah,
basically, yeah. Yeah, and I learned that pretty quick, that he couldn't be trusted. You know, but it was really confusing because he was loved. So at that point, my mum had her other 2 sisters living with her as well. And they all loved Tommy because he would drink, he was fun, he was, you know, the youngest. He was like the baby of the family. You know, like the youngest of the family normally gets treated a bit differently, right? And so I go to school and I'm loud and I'm angry and I'm unpredictable, and they slap a label on me for all sorts of stuff, you know. Really, what was I trying to do? I was trying to create safety, because if I knew I could keep you at arm's length just by being a mouthy little shit, well, that meant I was safe. If all adults were at arm's length, I'm safe. But for the teachers and the social workers, they would have looked at me and gone, oh, that kid's a problem. He's got a problem. He's got behavioural issues, you know. But really, it was stemming from me wanting to feel safe, me wanting to keep all adults at arm's length. Because after all, if my own family hurts me, then what's the average guy on the street going to do to me? But growing up on my council estate, the role models were the older kids. And I know in the press that people have labelled me as being an ex-gang member and stuff like that. I wasn't a part of a gang. We were just from a council estate. We were a group of kids who just grew up in poverty. We didn't have a gang name or anything like that.
You had no choice but to be a gang.
Yeah, it was just like all of our dads were gone, and it was like the elder kids became the father figures, and that was it. But there was one defining moment for me, which is really important, and I speak about it in my new book, where I had a friend of mine called Darren, and his mum sadly overdosed. And I remember one night we was out playing on the estate, and we stopped playing, we took a break, and we're standing in a circle, and one of the older kids said, "Darren, how you doing, mate?" And Darren just burst into tears. And all of us as young kids, I must have been 8 or 9 years old at the time, all of us as young kids just froze. Like, we didn't know what to do. Like, we were bearing in mind, messages have been drilled into us from a young age. Big boys don't cry, stop acting like a girl, blah, blah, blah. And so Darren's crying. Naturally, he's lost his mum. You know what I mean? His dad was in Nick. And then just in that moment, his nan shouted out the window, "Darren, your dinner's ready." And it was like he went in and we all took this massive sigh of relief. And what happened next, I didn't realise would define the rest of my life, was one of the older kids said, "Fucking hell, man, I think Darren's lost the plot, I don't think he's going to come back from this." What I'd done with that information was, your sadness is not welcome here. You have to take your sadness and you have to bury it. And you have to hide it, because you will get judged. And, I didn't realise how damaging that was for me until much later in life, where even I couldn't cry. Things were really sad. I couldn't cry. I couldn't let people in because I'd took a part of myself and hidden it. I'd buried it so deep.
Probably the most important part of yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Because sadness is a natural human emotion. It's a part of life, and can you truly get close to someone if they're not able to even tap into that emotion at all, if nothing makes them sad?
If you're putting it in a little bottle and storing it away over here, giving no one access to it, no one's ever going to know who you really are.
Yeah, right.
So you carried this with you.
So I buried it, right? And so fast forward to, when I'm a teenager now, I've been kicked out of school, and I'm 15 years old at the time, and I remember at this point people would say Michael's in a gang. I'm not. We're just a group of kids from a council estate. But one of the things that growing up, you naturally progressed into crime, whether it was selling drugs or robbing stuff, and it started off with shoplifting. I'd go into places like Richmond. Have you heard of Richmond in Surrey? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Isleworth is right next to Richmond. So you got this piss poor council estate, right next to Richmond. And I remember I walking in there the first time and looking around I couldn't believe these houses weren't a block of flats. I'm like, it's like one family lives in that whole house, and with multiple cars on the driveway. And it kind of justified my reason to rob them. Later on, rob the shops and rob the houses.
Oh, what you thought they can afford?
I was like, they can afford it. They've got too much. We need to take some. It's too uneven. It's too unfair. But that's where my criminal career started. I'm not on here claiming to be a tough guy or a gangster. I'm certainly not.
You started out as a communist.
But I love that, Liam. But so I started, nicking stuff from M&S, and it felt perfectly justified. And it wasn't until I watched this movie called Menace to Society. Do you remember Menace to Society?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I remember Menace to Society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that, and the fella had a firearm, and he went into a shop, and someone said something about his mum, and he's like, "What did you say about my mum?" And he just shot the shopkeeper. And I had this light bulb moment. I was like, if you had a gun, you could just go in and take the money. Why am I trying to rob stuff to then sell it? I can just go straight to the source, just get the money. And so I went shopping around trying to get a gun, and back then in the 90s, it was difficult to get a firearm, But I ended up getting an imitation firearm, and that's when I, committed my first armed robbery, allegedly. Allegedly there was more than that, but got convicted of one.
What were the specifics of the alleged crime?
Attempted robbery with possession of an imitation firearm.
And was that in a shop, a bank, someone's house?
That was a newsagent's.
Right.
Yeah. So I went in, imitation firearm, held the gun, opened the till. And this one where the woman was like, no. And so,
No.
it was like, so we got into this argument, and in the end, I think I left with, you know, a pack of fags and something. And as I walked out, I'd get to the door. I knew the camera was behind me, and I pulled the balaclava up, and the local paperboy pulled up on his bike. He skidded up on his bike, and he saw my face, and I knew him. And so I ran off, and the police kind of pulled him in and interrogated him and said, you know, who is it? We know you know who it is. So who is it? If you don't tell us, you're... So then he told him it's Michael Maisey, and that was it. That was like my first proper offence.
And did you get jailed for that?
No, but they gave me like a hefty order of like youth justice work, community service, just a whole load of stuff that was going to take me like 4 years to complete. But then subsequently, I ended up going to prison anyway, like about 2 weeks later, just when I just turned 16, and that's when the attempted murder charge came on top.
Talk me through that.
Yeah, so we were a group of kids from a council estate, most of us from immigrant backgrounds. Some were Irish immigrants, some were from the Caribbean, some from Africa, some from India, right? So we were a multicultural group of kids. And where we lived, the council estate was right next to Twickenham Rugby Stadium. So anytime there was a rugby game on, rugby is predominantly watched by, you know, middle-class white people from what we saw growing up, right? When there was a rugby game on, it was always a bad day for us because our council estate, everyone would be trying to park on there. There'd be loads of, you know, wealthy white people coming through drunk, getting mouthy. And it was on a rugby night, you know, but it was actually in Twickenham town centre. And one of my friends got into an argument with a rugby fan. The rugby fan was racist towards him, and my mate just stabbed him in the face and throat, like just repeatedly.
With a knife?
It was with a broken bottle. Smashed the bottle and done him that way. And everyone ran, and I stayed with my mate and was like, I could see he was going to kill him, and I was like, mate, you're going to fucking kill him. Like, stop, and pulled him off. And there was one eyewitness who came and said, look, I didn't see the incident, but what I did see was the white kid and the mixed race kid running away. And so the police, you know, looked at the CCTV, could identify me, and we both got arrested. And, you know, back then, and it's probably still prevalent even now, is you don't grass. You know automatically, you get nicked, you just go no comment. And so we went to the police station. They took us I went to Richmond, he went to Twickenham, and we just went no comment all the way. And they said, you know, if you don't tell us who done it, you're both going to go to prison for attempted murder. And so I kind of, you know, just accepted that, you know, and naively, and I would say quite arrogantly, was a bit excited about it, you know, about going to Young Offenders Institution. You know, I'm not saying that to try and make myself look big, Liam, right?
Well, that's interesting because I can relate to that. As a young lad with no father figure, you know you get credibility by going in and out of jail when you're young, and you almost romanticise about being in jail.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
I get it.
And mate, we would see people come out of prison to our council estate. They'd have a party for them. They were treated like a celebrity.
Yep.
They were glorified. So that's what I saw growing up. You know,
that's what you was aspiring to be.
Yeah, I was like, bloody hell! Look at the treatment they get when they get out. So I was quite excited to get there, and that was very short lived. You know what? You get to Feltham Young Offenders, and they literally open the cell door, close the cell door, and that's it. Like I was like in a cell, tiny cell with this guy for 23 hours a day. Like that was it. There was nothing else. That was it.
And what sentence did you get?
I didn't get a sentence off that, right? So I got a thing called judge in chambers, right? So we got right up to the trial, and at this point we got moved to lap wing. So lap wing was the wing where either you come to when you first come to prison, like an induction wing, but also if you're going out the next morning, they'll move you to lap wing because it's right next to the gates. And so we were due to go to trial the next day. I think I'd been in about 6 months. And my co-defendant was in the cell above me, and we were talking about the case. I hope that happens. And someone opened the flap on my cell door and said, "Pack your stuff, Maisey, you're going home. You've got judge in chambers." And I was kind of hanging out the cell window talking to my co-D above, and I thought it was a wind-up. And then like 10 minutes later, the governor comes and he's like, "Maisey, what are you doing, mate? Pack your stuff, you're going home, you've got judge in chambers." I was like, "You got judge in chambers?" Judge in chambers was like a myth in prison. Like a myth and legend. Like, "Oh, have you ever heard about judge in chambers? If they find some bit of evidence that demands your immediate release, they'll just say you've got judge in chambers." But I'd never known anyone to get it.
So you were sat there on remand?
So I was sat there on remand, waiting to go to trial the next day on Lapwing, and they come and they say, "You got to go home." So I literally, at that point, everyone's released, come out for dinner, and I had my prison bag, and I said to my co-defendant, I won't say his name because he probably wants to remain anonymous, I was like, "Mate, just take it all." I had the little battery-powered radio, tobacco, sugar. I was like, "Just take it all." Just give him my whole prison bag. And the only thing I took out was a book by Mike Tyson. I was reading Mike Tyson's life story.
So your co-D didn't get the same treatment as you? He stayed in?
He stayed in, yeah.
What did he get for doing that?
He got 4 years and done another 2.5 on top.
And how long was you on remand for?
It was about 6 months.
Ray Winston, Scum.
Yeah.
I'm sure most people watching this will be our age and they'll remember Scum. The violence, the sexual abuse, the bullying from the screws, how ruthless it was, dog eat dog, just horrendous. So it's Feltham, weren't it?
Feltham Young Offenders,
So
yeah.
how does Feltham Young Offenders compare to the actual film Scum?
Yeah, so at least for me, there was no like sexual abuse or anything like that. There was no guys trying to have sex with each other. It was, in my experience, it was about 80% black, 20% white. Most of the white kids got bullied, and the ones who didn't were the ones who stood up for themselves. You couldn't ever win because you're outnumbered. But if you stood up for yourself, then you wouldn't get robbed for your dinner, for your canteen, for all that sort of stuff, you know.
Was there much racial tension then?
Not really. It didn't feel like racial tension. It just felt like young boys trying to push each other's boundaries, you know, and it's like what you said, like dog eat dog, you know. And so if you know the white kids are outnumbered, naturally you're going to, what can I get out of this? How can I exploit this for my own benefit, you know? And I was just one of the white kids who would fight. I wouldn't win. I wasn't actually tough. I just grew up, you know, in a traveller community where fighting was part of our culture. Like,
was up for it.
Yeah, I was just like, you know, I wasn't a good fighter back then. And I'm not saying like I'm a good fighter now. I'm not saying that either. But survival was like, you just have to fight. That's all you have to do. You don't have to win. You have to fight. And I think when you asked about the story, I share a painful story from that. And I share this story in the book, Young Offender, was when I went onto the wing. When you first get onto the wing, everyone's sizing each other up. And I quickly realised that the top dog on the wing was a guy called Pepsi. And they called him Pepsi. He was a black lad, really short but really stocky. So they called him Pepsi because it's like a can of Pepsi, you know, really short and stocky. And I went into the showers, and while I had the soap on my hair, and the soap was in my eye, someone took my shower gel, right? And so it's a schoolboy error, you know. I'm new to the prison. I don't know this stuff, you know, that you got to put it down your pants, right? I didn't know this. So I'm like, all right, who's nicked my shower gel? No one says nothing. Who's nicked my shower gel? No one says nothing. And then I'm like, okay, whoever's nicked my shower gel, go fuck your mum. And then with that, Pepsi turns around. What did you say about my mum? And we get into this fight in the showers where it don't matter how good at fighting you are. When you're in a slippery, it's pure luck who's going to win. And I caught him. He caught me. I caught him, but I caught him a bit better than he caught me. And I dropped him. And then governors come in, and it all got split up. So you wouldn't have even told who would have actually won that fight if it had played out. But
you still dented his ego.
For the first 30 seconds, it looked like I'd beat Pepsi, which was the worst outcome. Because now I've got this guy on my case who's got loads of pals, and everyone else is looking at me like I'm some tough guy, which is a label you don't want in prison as a white kid. At least back then. You don't want it.
Least of all young offenders.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's trying to prove themselves, aren't they?
Everyone wants that title. And so, so I kind of rode that out for a little bit, kept my head down, and then I go to court. I think it was for plea, where we plead guilty or not guilty. And I come back to Felton, but I come back to the wing really late. So there was loads of traffic as we were coming through Feltham High Street. And by the time I get back to the prison, the governors have changed over. It's from the day governor to the night governor. The night governor didn't know, don't put Maisey and Pepsi in the same cell. And in Feltham Young Offenders, on every wing, there's one dorm. A dorm is a 4-man cell. And the governor goes, right, Maisey, I'm going to put you in a dorm. I was like, yeah, sweet. I was like, great. Like, instead of just having one inmate to talk to or you're banged up on your own, there's 3 people to talk to. Like, it keeps, it makes it a bit more entertaining. So we go up to the dorm, open the door, Pepsi's there with his 2 pals. And just, I had this moment of like, fuck, what do I do? And just as I went to talk to the governor, he'd slammed the door behind me. And Pepsi was like, no, we're cool, man. We're cool. Come. We're cool. Maisey, we're cool, man. It was a long time ago. Come and sit down. Like, it's all good. Like, talk to me. Tell me about where you're from. And at this point, I'm going, oh, I'm so fucked. Like, I'm so fucked now. But what do I do? If I try and run to the door and press the buzzer, they're probably going to try and get me. So I'm running. I've got like 100 things running through my head at this moment. And we're talking, and then, lights go out, and I'm laying there in bed, and I'm kind of, thinking, are they gonna get me? Maybe they're not gonna get me. Are they sleeping? It looks like they're sleeping. He's definitely sleeping. So I was like, okay, well, I just got to, try and go to sleep. And the next thing I wake up to is a pillow over my head, and just like raining down on me, punches to the face, to the body.
All of them on you?
All of them, yeah, all 3 of them on me, yeah. No matter how much I shouted, no one could hear what I was saying. But other inmates in the cells around them could hear. Pepsi's mates could hear. And they started shouting. They started saying, fucking get him, smash him up. And my cellmate, who I was banged up with, was a fella called Dread, really tall black guy with dreadlocks. So everyone called him Dread. He caught wind of it. And so he pressed the buzzer and was like, Governor, what's all the noise? And he was like, the governor was like, I don't know. He was like, where's Maisey? Maisey hasn't come back tonight. He's like, I put Maisey in the dorm. He was like, is Pepsi in the dorm? Governor's like, yeah, why? He's like, fucking get up to the dorm. And so the governor come up and opened the door, and, luckily, if it wasn't for Dredd, and I've never ever met Dredd again, and I'd love to see him if he ever listens to this podcast. He was in Feltham in the 90s. He saved my life. What
condition were you in after the beating?
All my face was mashed up. All my eyes were.
So they'd done a proper job.
Yeah. I was taken to the hospital wing. I was in the hospital wing for about, I think, 2 weeks or something like that. Like just bruised up, a couple of broken ribs. Face was pretty bruised up. But it was more the mental pain around that, because I knew in my head I've got to go back to this wing. That was the harder part of it. I knew I was on a clock that was ticking down every day. At some point, they're going to go back to general population. So that was the harder part. The wounds, I was like, I knew I could recover. It was a bit of how am I going to manage that when I've got to go back on the wing? And that was it. That was my first stint in prison. That kind of stuff with Pepsi passed. I took the beating on the chin. I kept my head down. There was no repercussions after that. It was kind of like I'd got him, he got me. We were kind of equal. And then I got out from judging chambers, And
how long did you stay out of jail for until you went back?
I would say it's probably about a month, 2 months, something like that. It weren't long.
So it didn't faze you, that stint in jail?
No, it did, mate. It did. Mate, I did not want to go back to prison. I left prison, I was like, I am never coming back to this place.
Right.
I am never coming back here. I read this book. Well, I didn't read all of it. I read some of it, Mike Tyson's life story. And I was like, if Mike Tyson can do it, I can bloody do it. So I got out of prison and I was like, right, I'm gonna go for some jobs. So I started applying for like jobs that I'd really like to do, you know, like jobs I'd enjoy. And like the first question they ask is like, okay, so what happened? You didn't get any GCSEs from school? No, I got kicked out of school. Okay, all right. Where have you been? Like, there's a bad gap in your CV. What have you been doing since you left school? Well, I know they're going to DBS check me. So it's like, well, yeah, you know, look, I went to prison for a crime I didn't commit, but you will see on the DBS check armed robbery and possession of firearms. And straight away, you feel like the energy change. I went to all the jobs that I would like to do, and then I went to jobs I could just about tolerate. And then I had in my head the last chance saloon for me was the military. I was like, if all of this fails, I'm just going to go to the military and say, just stick me on the front line in some hellhole somewhere. And I went to the careers office. I think it was in Covent Garden back then. And I went in there, was honest with them straight away. I said, listen, mate, you know, you're going to see this on the record anyway, but I'm not looking for the best job. I'm just looking for any job. But I've got a conviction of armed robbery and possession of an imitation firearm. And the careers officer was just like, look, mate, I'm sorry. You know, we're not going to put a loaded firearm in your hand when you've got a conviction for it. So you're going to have to, you know, just, you know, we can't help you. And that was it, sadly, Liam. You know, like after that, mate, I kind of walked out of that careers office and accepted you're going to be just like your father and just like your uncles, you know. And yeah, went back, started committing crimes and then was back in prison the second time, you know, a couple of months later for, it was like a mixture of things. I think it was like, you know, theft of a motor vehicle, burglary of a shop, burglary of a house in Richmond. It's like a mixture of things. Yeah, they kind of just nicked me and, you know, went back to prison. And again, it took a long time because there was multiple cases and I think I'd done the best part of a year. And because of the time spent, I got released, but got released with, you know, more conditions, more community service, more all these orders and stuff like that. And then after the second time, mate, I didn't even try and get a job. I'd kind of accepted this is my life.
And was the second stint a lot easier than the first stint?
The second stint, I knew what to do now. I knew it's not even that I knew that I had to fight. I knew how to carry myself in a way that communicated, we will go. If you want to go, we're going to go.
So there was no beatings the second time round?
There was no real beatings. It was more of like, I knew how to ride it out. I knew it was 23 hours a day bang up. I knew you need a deck of cards, rolling tobacco and a radio. And so as soon as I got my first canteen money, I bought that and I was like, just get your head down, get out. And, you know, when I got out the second time, I didn't even try and get a job. Just went straight back to the street corner. It was the late 90s. I don't know if you remember it. It was like crack and heroin was everywhere. It was nowhere. It was weed and ecstasy. And then suddenly crack and heroin was everywhere.
In areas that you would least expect.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there was like the rich kids from Twickenham and Richmond were smoking crack and taking heroin. It was like, and all the kids on the council estate were driving BMWs. They were like, everyone was making loads of money off it. And so I thought, great, that's what I'm going to do. I want to try and be a drug dealer. And of course, I was a terrible drug dealer because I'm an addict. And I would just end up taking all the drugs and then go out and have to rob to pay it back, you know.
Was you taking and selling the white and the brown or just one?
Yeah, both of it, yeah.
And using both?
And using both as well, yeah.
That's heavy.
Yeah, it was, mate. So for me, it was first, I tried the white and I was like, bloody hell, this is good. And it was like, I'd want more and more and more until I'd go through the whole supply. I was like, bloody hell, this is ridiculous. How do you stop this? You know what I mean? And someone said, you need to take a bit of brown. That brings you back down and it will stop you going through. It stops the craving for more.
And how did you use the brown?
Chasing the dragon.
Okay.
Yeah, I never injected it.
I mean, that's enough.
Yeah, I mean.
That's heavy.
Right.
And this is such a young man as well.
Yeah, I would have been 17 at the time, yeah. I could see why people get addicted to it, Liam, right? Because I remember clearly the first time I'd done it.
Took it all away.
Yeah. It was like a warm blanket in front of a fire and everything's safe and lovely. It gave so much and it was so hard to not want more, you know, and I was really lucky that I got nicked and got took back to prison, you know, because I think a lot of the people from my community who didn't have that are dead now. because it took their life, the addiction took their life. So I count myself lucky that I went back to prison the third time. And that was where, that was where I kind of hit my emotional rock bottom. That's where the turning point in this story is.
Your third sentence.
My third stint in prison. Yeah.
And final?
It was my final one, yeah. I didn't know I was physically addicted to heroin until I got to the police station. So I get to the police station and they've got like loads of charges on me at this point. Assault on police, ABH, possession of a bladed weapon, multiple burglaries. It's like the police just let me run riot for 6 months. And then I racked up loads and then it was like, great, we're going to get him birded off for a long time. And so I get to the police station. I didn't even know I was physically addicted because I was just getting up every day, taking it. And then I'm in the station, like, terrible. And the doctors come in and they're like, how much were you taking? I was taking it. I was like, okay, you're addicted. You're physically dependent on heroin. You need to take this, this, and this. And so I started this medication to kind of supplement the heroin until I got to Feltham. I get to Feltham, I got put on a wing called Swallow, which was like the detox wing. And they gave me 2 options for detox. They was like, you can either take a long drawn out one, I think it was over like 4 to 6 weeks or something like that, or you can take this intense, is really intense, 2-week detox, which is banned now, by the way, because there were so many deaths off the back of it. But me at the time, thinking I was this tough guy, I was like, give me the 2-week detox, I'll be fine. And that was it. I started the detox and it was like hell on earth. That's the only way I can describe it. Like you're boiling hot 1 minute, and you're freezing cold the next minute so quickly that the sweat on your forehead is cold. It was happening that fast.
Itchy.
Itchy. Thinking you're seeing stuff under your skin. Thinking like you've seen a little insect crawl around your hand and up your arm. Like you're looking for stuff, seeing stuff in the room.
Horrible.
The worst bit, Liam, was the voices. The voices I heard, which I believe, is probably something like a demon or the devil or something. And the voices were just like, just kill yourself, mate. Just do yourself a favour. Do all of us a favour. You're no good. You're just like your father. Just do everyone a favour. Kill yourself. And it was horrible. It was like, I was, 10 hours into it. And I was like, if this carries on, mate, I don't know if I'm going to cope. And on my first prison sentence, a young lad called Jeremy hung himself in his prison cell. And it took me a long time to figure out how he'd done it. But in the end, I did. And I knew in my head, I'm like, if this gets much worse, I've always got that as an option. It was like an option B that felt really far away. But if it gets on top, I've got an option B. And then over the hours, the idea of suicide as an escape came closer and closer. And sadly, I did try and take my own life in that prison cell, and I wrapped my bed sheet up like a rope, and I remember at the time convinced it wouldn't work, and because I was in such a mess, you see, I was like, I'm bound to fuck this up, and it worked first time, and what amazes me about it, Liam, is that I instantly didn't want to die. As soon as I knew I was going to die, I instantly didn't want to die. It's like I was instantly fighting to get it off. And I remember this like drawn out battle that felt like an hour, but was probably a minute or 2 minutes. I don't know how long it actually takes for you to suffocate yourself. But thinking about my mum, thinking about my little brother Justin, thinking about Mary, another woman who helped me, and just disappointment. Like, I'm going to die in this sweaty, pissy cell, and this sadness, and then just, then I don't remember anything after that.
Who saved you?
It was a prison officer. And this is what I mean, is like look, I'm not religious, but I believe in God. Right? And that's controversial for some people to understand, right?
It's funny, I am religious, but I don't believe in God.
Right.
It's a new thing.
Right. It's weird, but and when I say God, I don't mean what you think in religious things. For me, it's like the universe. It's like certain things have happened in my life where I shouldn't be here, but somehow I'm here. either that's just luck or whether something's played a hand in it. Something's played a hand in it. That thing, I don't understand what it is or what it looks like. I just used to call it God. It's easier for my brain to understand it, right? And that prison officer, he told me a week or so after, said he was just doing a crossword, and he said, I just thought, I'm going to do the round. And he said, I closed the newspaper like that. And he said, I come out and I started on the ground floor and I turned to my right. He said, if I had have gone up the stairs or would have turned to my left, he said, you would have been dead, Michael. I come down, I went to the right, you was 3 cells in, and I come in and I cut you down and brought you back to life. And that was what I remembered. That's where I come back. That's where I start remembering things again. Seeing a light. And I was like, it sounds crazy. I was thinking, wow, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And it was just the light on the ceiling of the prison cell.
Did it distract you from the withdrawal you were going through?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a way of trying to control the pain. It was a way of escaping, the same way addiction does, right? How can I escape this pain I'm in? But little did I know is like as soon as it was about to deliver everything I thought I wanted, I realised I didn't want it.
I mean, there's such a cautionary tale in just that chapter alone. The amount of people that will be sitting there looking at a bit of rope, convinced it's the best thing for them, but then it flashes through their mind like it did yours when they're halfway through. This is not what I want, but it's too late. No one's there to save them.
Yeah,
that's something to consider. If anyone's listening to this, if you are thinking about doing something irreversible, there is someone sat opposite me that was feeling the exact same way, and when push comes to shove, they didn't actually want to go through with it, and now they're living a great life, which people will find out in due course. That's the cautionary tale there. That could save someone's life, and it probably will. So how did your sentence finish then after you tried to end it?
They brought me back to life, and I was put in a padded cell. A padded cell is like you can't hurt yourself. Even the toilet flush is a button on the wall, and that was it. I was given three conversations with a psychiatrist, which just felt like a tick box exercise to say they'd done enough. But the real defining moment for me was as I laid on the floor of that padded cell, I was in the fetal position, and I remember saying, if there's a God, you better bloody show up right now, because I bloody need you right now. And it was weird, like I didn't see it, have a vision of a horse or a man with a white beard or any of that stuff, but I just felt something in me that I didn't feel alone in that moment. I felt like there was the energy of something in that cell with me.
That's nice.
Yeah, right? It's hard to explain, and this is what I mean. It's not religion. It's nothing you read about in any religious text, because trust me, I searched for it, right?
I get it.
Yeah, all right? It's
Yeah,
just
I get
something happened. In that moment of desperation, I asked for help, something came, and it just felt like I wasn't alone, right? And so fast forward, 2 weeks later, they say, Maisey, you got a visit from your mum. And they called my mum up and, said your son almost lost his life. And so my mum came to visit, and even then I was still beaten up. My neck, my neck was still all bruised up. And my mum come out, and she was like, "How you doing, son?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm all right. I'm just getting by." I was like, "How are you doing?" I was like, "You look different. What's happened to you?" And I was thinking, she's on some new antidepressant or something, And she was like, "Oh, I'm sober. I've decided to get sober. I'm like a couple of months sober." And mate, in the middle of this visiting room, which is normally a place where you try and act tough, you try and show the outside world this place ain't broken, mate.
You got other cons in there, ain't you?
Other cons sitting next to you. There was cons either side of me. And then when my mum said I'm sober, I bloody burst into tears in the middle of this visiting room and just let it all out. My mum hugged me, and
so I'm feeling that, innit?
Yeah, it was, mate. It was like, it was like an iceberg melting. This thing that had been frozen for so long. There was a little bit was melting. And it was funny, after that, it was like I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to believing I'm this tough guy. It's like now I had evidence to prove otherwise. I tried to take my own life, and I've cried in the bloody visiting hall.
Yeah.
So clearly that's not who you are. You think you're this tough guy. Really, you're not. And it started this journey of like, well, who is Michael then? If Michael's not this tough guy that he thinks he is, that his whole identity is built around, then who is he? I left prison, got out of prison just before my 19th birthday, and went to an AA meeting, you know, and back then there weren't many 18-year-olds at AA meetings, you know.
So did you come out of jail and immediately start drinking then?
No. So I come out of prison, and like my mum was sober. My mum's newly sober, and I was fascinated. I was
So your mum's at the meetings?
yeah. So my mum was like, "I'm taking you to a meeting."
Yeah.
And my mum was a bad drinker, Liam. My mum was like a street drinker. You know, you see the drunks on the street. That's where my mum was like, you know.
Yeah.
So now my mum's sober, so I'm like, there must be something happening at these meetings because it's bloody got her sober. And so I went along, and it was hard because I was the youngest by 20 years. And back then, which would have been late 90s, early 2000s, going to AA, getting sober, you're a loser. You know, now it's a bit more cool now. Yeah, there's celebrities who are sober, and it's made it a bit more cool to be sober. Back then, you were a bum. If you went to AA, you're a mess. And so I had to battle all of that. But what happened was, in them early days of going to AA, it started planting a seed that maybe you're drinking to block something out. And it started planting a seed in my head. And no matter how hard I tried to go back and drink like a normal person again, I couldn't. I'm now like doing it because of peer pressure and to numb out the pain of just my everyday existence.
Yeah, you don't want to be using it for medicinal purposes. It's either celebrate with it or don't go near it.
Yeah, right, yeah. And so that was, I would say, that the journey of getting sober. You know, I eventually got sober in 2007, and I've been sober ever since. So that's 17 years now.
I'll drink to
I've been sober. Yeah, thank you, mate.
Diet Coke.
Nice.
But fair play, because there's a lot of people out there that would just wish they could do it.
Yeah.
But they can do it. You're walking, talking, living proof that you can do it if you flick the switch and decide, I want a better life.
I remember someone said to me, Liam, you're going to have the life beyond your wildest dreams. And I was like, what a ridiculous statement, you know. But here I am, you know, 17 years sober, you know. I've got a lovely house in Devon, 10 acres of land, you know. I've got a wife, 3 kids, none of them see me drink. I've got a successful business. I'm a award-winning author, you know, like...
You make your own honey.
Yeah, I'm a beekeeper as well, you know, like...
Yeah.
But I shouldn't be here. You know, statistically, from the kids in my community, from all my brothers and sisters, I should be dead or in prison, but I'm not. And I believe it's because I made that first step to get sober. I believe getting sober saved my life. It changed the complete direction of my life.
You were drinking to block out your childhood trauma, which is so common. People don't realise what happens between the age of 1 and 7 is just so important. You really are moulding someone's brain, and it sticks forever. But I've had people opposite me, like in their 60s, and from what happened between the ages of 1 and 7, it doesn't leave you. It's always there, unless you deal with it head on like you've done. Can we talk about some complications? I'd imagine there's trust, abandonment, a plethora of issues that come with living on the receiving end of abuse.
Yeah.
The obvious one would be relationships, the complications, like intimacy.
Yeah. So I'm so glad you've asked me this question, because this is something that isn't spoken about enough. Because look, I think, you know, we're human beings and we don't live as lone wolves. We have to come back into connection, back into community, right? And there's a big missing piece around this, around, you know, how do we connect with other people when we've had that life? You know, when you've grown up in a world where you've had to build walls to keep yourself safe, how do you take them walls down and connect with someone? And that was one of the hardest things I had to learn to do. And I give credit to my wife, Sasha, for this, really. You know, I met my wife, Sasha, back in 2011. You know, been together 14 years now, I think. But when I met her, I knew instantly I loved her. I knew it. I was like, I'm going to marry this woman. And I was a very good, let's call it salesman. I could show you a version of me that ticked every bloody box.
But didn't exist.
Right? But as soon as you wanted to scratch beneath the surface and get to know the real me, oh, no. You stay right there. I don't want to let you too close. And luckily, my wife, Sasha, trained as a therapist, right? And
was it out of fear or caution?
It was, for me, when you grow up in a world where every person who's meant to love you hurts you, and then someone shows up in your life who's trying to love you, what you bump up against is this thing, are you going to do what everyone else has done? Because I've got a lot of evidence in my past to prove that everyone who shows up with the intention of loving me actually hurts me. And so this is what I was bumping up against with my wife, Sasha, and I didn't even know it, but luckily she trained as a therapist and she used the notice and wonder technique. And the notice and wonder technique goes something like this. Michael, I notice in these moments of connection, you choose to work late or go to the gym or isolate or avoid these conversations. And I wonder, is it something to do with me or is there something going on for you? And I wanted to get defensive at the time. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. What are you poking around for? And I went through all of that in my head, didn't say it. And then I was like, yeah, I don't know why. I was like, but I'll go and find out. And I went and had a female therapist and she quickly identified what we have. She says, okay, well, what happened? Tell me about what happened to you, how your loved ones treated you in the first 6 years of your life, of your childhood. How did your dad treat you? Well, dad was gone. How did your mum treat you? She was an alcoholic. Was there any other primary caregivers? Yeah, my uncle Tommy. How did he treat you? He physically and sexually abused. Okay. So the people who you were meant to trust and love
abused
you and hurt you. And now you got someone who's trying to love you. No, and this is what you're bumping up against. I remember going, wow, this is amazing. I was like, but it's a bloody mess. What do I do with this? And she was like, I want you to take this mess and tell Sasha. Don't put a bow on it and make it pretty. Don't sweeten it up. Just tell her. She said, because if this is true love can handle this mess. It can hold it. And I remember thinking, you're off your head. She was a Canadian therapist, Catherine O'Kane, one of the best bloody therapists I've ever worked with. I thought this might work in Canada. They're all a bit lovey-dovey in Canada, aren't they? I thought in the UK, she's going to think, you're a fruitcake, Michael. You're too much. You're too heavy. You got too much baggage. I can't be with you. I was certain if I told her this, she'd reject me. And I sat her down. Fucking hell, it makes me emotional thinking of this moment. I sat her down and I said, in these moments where we should connect, I feel terrified you're going to hurt me, just like everyone else hurt me in my childhood. And she paused for a minute, grabbed my face and kissed me and started crying. And I started crying. And she was like, I thought maybe you didn't love me anymore. And I was like, no, I love you so much that it would break me if you done what everyone else done. So the way I try and manage it is by running away. And we hugged, and that was my first experience of intimacy. I was like 28, 29 years old. Like I'd been running from it all my life. I'd never let anyone in until that moment, and I'm just so grateful I met her, someone who sat with me long enough and inquired long enough to help me find my way back to the root of the cause of the problem.
Someone who noticed and wondered. Notice
and wonder. It's a great technique for anyone who's curious about using it, yeah.
Yeah. And I think number one biggest fear for people is public speaking. I think if people really think about that question long and hard, I'd say love is more scary. Mm-hmm. It leaves you in a vulnerable place morning, noon and night. And you really have got to trust somebody to, A, love them completely and also to allow them to love you, the actual you.
Yeah, well, that's it, mate. And what we're talking about here is like letting her see all of me. So not letting her see the sales rep, like letting her see Michael, the traumatized, scared little boy, showing her that as well. And I tell you, there's no greater feeling than another human being loving you for all of you, not just loving you for your job or your money or the version of you you're showing them every ugly, bloody part of you, and they still love you. There's nothing more beautiful than that. That's where true love, true intimacy lies. It's like really showing you, here's all of me. Here's me, this mess of a human being. Do you still love me? And my experience was she welcomed it.
It's also where true strength lies. For you to allow yourself to become completely vulnerable, where all your barriers are down. I think as much as I'd like to say I've done the same, I'm probably not 100% there. And I know it's the best thing to do. There is part of me where there's a barrier up somewhere. And I've not been as brave as you in certain situations to actually fully commit to vulnerability. It's hard. I know it's the way to set yourself free and build something far more beautiful than you ever imagined. But, it's tough. And that's me being honest with you. That's me showing you my vulnerability.
Yeah.
I haven't been brave enough to be as vulnerable as you've allowed yourself to be. So again, I tip my hat to you. And
mate, look, that's why I'm here, Liam, because I love you, because you're just an honest bloke, and you got a good heart, and I also want to add onto this piece is is that it's not easy. When you're saying it's hard, it really is hard.
Oh, yeah.
Even now, it might sound like Michael's got it figured out. Trust me, I don't. If my wife was sitting here, she'd bloody tell you. These things creep back up again and again and again. This is how it works for me, Liam, right? If I don't do things that contribute towards my own happiness, I don't believe I have any right to believe that I deserve to be happy. Mm. And if I'm not happy, let me tell you something, I am a bloody nightmare to live with. If I'm not getting up in the morning, exercising, meditating, doing my breath work, doing some gratitude, if I don't do that stuff, right, I know slowly over time I become a bit of a twat. And that ripples out to my kids and my wife. So, I have to show up for myself every day. I don't do it because I have to do it. I do it because I like to feel happy. So it's a choice rather than I'm a prisoner of my own making. And that was a hard question to bring to my wife. I remember when I first discovered that. And I grew up in a house where anything difficult, you just drank or used drugs. And here I was having to say, listen, I really need your support to help me carve out some time every day where I can do this routine. I need you to cover my back. I need you to help with the morning routine with the kids. I need you to, help with a school run or whatever. But I need that time every day for me. Because if I don't, you're going to get a version of me that ain't good for you or the kids. And I remember, again, convinced there'd be a backlash from that. Oh, what about me? Or blah, 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 blah. But actually it wasn't. It was yeah, great. What do you need? How long do you need? Whatever you need, I'll do it. I want that version of you every day,
At what point did you think, I'm now the version I want to be, I'm now going to go back to prison and start, is it prisoners that you speak to in there?
Yeah, prisoners. I mean, we do schools and colleges and even universities. We do corporates as well.
Can we go into that now? Is this
let's go into that.
A good time to
because
get into
that? I think that's good. I've always done prison service, mainly through AA and NA for the past 17 years. But more so since 2018, since I set up the charity. And that was one of the things that became clear to me. When I moved to Devon, I set up a very successful company. I was able to step away and basically do whatever I wanted and have a passive income from it. But
and what is the company?
It's an estate agents in Isleworth. It's called Oak Hill Estate Agents. I've still got it today. I'm still a shareholder. My brother Justin and Andy Walker run it, and they do a great job, But they both realise, look, Michael's heart isn't here. Michael set this up to fix the money problem so he could, just have an income. Michael's heart is out when he's helping people, and I've always done that, And when I moved to Devon, I live on a 10-acre plot. I had this house. I had the business. I had everything. But there was this little thing in me.
That's incredible.
Mate, it was, it was incredible looking out. I live on a plot of land that's bigger than my whole council estate. It's surreal. There was this kind of voice in my head of I looked out, I'm like, all the systems that failed me are still there. Mental health rising, addictions rising. Who would I be to just ride off in the sunset now and not do something about it? And so that's how Young Offender was born, and then the charity was born. And
so you wrote the book first?
Yeah, well, the book came just before I moved. So I won an award from the Metropolitan Police, which is really surreal, Liam. I tell you what, when I got that was mental, I got a letter through to my business address in Isleworth saying, you've been nominated for a Community Safety Hero Award by the Metropolitan Police. I remember at the time thinking, this is a wind-up. Someone's winding me up, because in my head, I'm a criminal. Still, I've been to prison, I've got convictions. Why would the Met Police give me an award? But anyway, I ended up going to this award ceremony and I won the award of Community Safety Hero for the work I'd done in prisons. And also within my community, I helped a lot of young kids who were going off the rails, get them back on track, just by sharing my story, by the way. Just by saying, listen, mate, that prison stuff, it ain't no glamorous life, you know, and saying to a lot of them, listen, mate, you won't survive in there.
And just before we get to this, but so what inspired you to be a better person? Was it because you never wanted your liberty taken again? Or was it because you were remorseful of the things you'd done and you didn't want to put any more pain into the world?
This is where the mindset changes, right? And I believe in the work I do. I believe in planting seeds. Like, I'm going to plant some seeds here today, and some of them might land in fertile soil and they might grow into someone's life, or they might land on someone's soil who's not quite ready yet. But for me, I'm going to take you back to when I first got out of prison. I first going to AA, and my first ever job, and it was a litter picker, a street sweeper in Kingston upon Thames, right? And I had to go to work every day in a high vis with one of them little sticks that picks up litter and a load of bags, refuse sacks. Yeah. And all the kids on my estate used to take the piss out of me. Maisey, you're a mug. You're earning, back then it was minimum wage. I think it was like less than $5 an hour. It was like, you're a mug, mate. Anyway, I kept doing that job. And something happened. I didn't realise in that job, something would happen to me that would change my whole outlook on life. And I'll tell you what it was. I was sitting in a park one day in Kingston, having a break, and I saw these joggers run past, and they stopped and they picked up a bottle of, I think it was Lucozade or something. They picked it up. It weren't theirs. They picked it up and put it in the bin. I was like, bloody hell, that's funny. It sounds like nothing, right? Mm. But where I grew up, mate, everyone just threw their own litter on. You couldn't even get them to put their own litter in the bin. Yeah. So my view of the world started changing. I'm like, okay, here's a different side of humanity I ain't seen.
There's good people out there.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I ain't seen that before. Then next thing I'd see parents walking their kids to school. And there was a few things that stood out to me. Both of the parents were there, mum and dad. Both of the parents were well dressed. Both of the parents were sober. And both of the parents were happy. Now, growing up on my estate, most of the dads were gone, and the mums had multiple kids and were angry, hungover and stressed out. They were like, bloody hurry up. And here I was seeing two parents, mum and dad, walking kids to school. They were happy, sober, well dressed. I was like, okay, it's another side of humanity I haven't seen. The final thing that nailed it for me, where I couldn't go back, I used to sit at Kingston train station. There was loads of homeless people outside the station. There still are today. And the young professionals who would go to work in their suits in the city, these were the people I used to judge, Liam. Mm. The people who had all the opportunities and money that I never had. I would see them stop and give the homeless people money and food and cigarettes and coffee, and every morning I'd see it, right? What happened was my view of the world started to change. I started to think maybe this world isn't as unfriendly as I thought it is, right? And years later, I stumbled across a quote by Albert Einstein. In one of his final interviews, someone asked Albert Einstein, what's the most important question you can ask? Albert Einstein responded with, is the universe a friendly place or not? He said, because if you decide if the universe is an unfriendly place, you're going to build walls to protect yourself, to stop the threats from getting in.
As you did. As
I did, yeah. But if you believe that this world is a friendly place, you'll look around and think, oh, it's friendly. I'll build some bridges of understanding. You'll be like, come here. So what was happening? These random acts of kindness I was witnessing by strangers, I never even spoke to any of them. It was helping me see another side of humanity, that maybe this world was a more friendly place. Off the back of that, I felt more confident to reach out and ask for help, knowing that I won't get hurt or shut down or rejected. And so that journey of recovery started in me when I was a street sweeper. I was a litter picker, surreal.
Humbled.
Yeah, exactly. I was humble enough to take that job for minimum wage to learn a lesson I never knew I'd be talking about here 20 plus years later. And it's a real important thing for me,
It's great that you can pin it down.
It is, mate. Yeah. And it's years of doing work on myself and sitting across the room from a therapist, But if you're one of them people, if you're listening and you're one of them people who holds the door open for someone or helps someone who's fallen over or gives money to the needy, just know someone like a younger version of me might be watching you. You might be changing their view of the world, you know, and that's what I always try and do now. If I see a homeless person, chuck them a fiver. And people say, you shouldn't do that. They're just going to buy drugs for you. I'm like, I don't care. Chuck them a fiver. Hold the door open for a woman.
And it bounces back. You don't need a thank you. You've got your thank you. You can see it.
Yeah, and I started this journey of self-development, which back then was quite scarce. There wasn't much self-development about, and what was there was very expensive. I had to save up a lot of money because I was on minimum wage. And slowly, I started to improve my life. So you fast forward now to 2018, right? And I'm standing in this place where I've achieved it all, right? But not only are all these systems still in place, addiction's at an all-time high, reoffending's at an all-time high, suicide's at an all-time high, but also the self-development space is saturated with, you know, bloody influencers, celebrities, podcasters, everyone jumping on this bloody mental health bandwagon, trying to make some money out of the people. And I was like, and in my head, I'm like, if everyone has to pay to access these tools, that is going to mean the people at the bottom are going to get even lower. And so I was like, I'm gonna do something about it. I've got a business here. I'm going to filter some of this money from my business into setting up a charity where all of the tools that changed my life are free. Anyone can access it. If you can afford to pay, chuck a few quid in. If you can't, just come. Just come and change your life. And what started as, you know, an event in my back garden, it's grown into something that, you know, we help over 2,000 people a year work in prisons across the UK, schools across the UK. And we now have a 25-acre outdoor retreat centre in Devon where we do monthly events as well. But, you know, this part of my journey has been the most challenging and the most rewarding part of my story, I'd say, to date. The most challenging because you see so much suffering and you're working with a section of society that is difficult to deal with. People who are right at the bottom, who look, for me, I'm a bit of a straight talker. If I think you're being a dick, I'm going to tell you you're being a dick. I'm going to get in your face a bit because I'm willing to risk upsetting you if it means you become a better man or woman. Some people don't like that. They want a yes man, and that's not me.
Do you warn them? I have walked into a shop with a gun before.
Yeah. Well, I hope before they arrive they read Young Offender. It should be part of the deal, shouldn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Some kind of presentation.
Prescribe reading.
Here's the disclaimer.
Yeah. You're interacting with someone who's a bit mentally unwell himself. You know?
I'm ready.
But this is it, you know. So it's been hard, but it's also been beautiful, you know, because, like, for instance, I'll speak about my prison outreach team, which consists of a good friend of mine called Sully, another friend of mine called Louis, all men who've been to prison. And when we go into the prisons and they take part in our workshops and our courses, right, something so beautiful happens when all the inmates sit down expecting another bloody tick box lecture.
Yeah, you've got ex-cons coming in.
And we all come in and say, yeah, I've done time here, I've done time. And then, boom, the walls come down.
Yeah.
Rapport is built.
Immediately.
Yeah. And the officers are looking like, how are they doing it? And it's like, look, this is what lived experience can do.
If you've not lived it, I'm not listening. Simple as that. If you haven't lived it, I'm not listening. I don't care what you've read, how many years you've been reading up on this shit. Real life is a lot different to paperwork. So you're the perfect fit. You're the perfect man for the job.
Yeah. Well, it's just theory, Liam, isn't it? If you haven't lived it,
exactly.
It's just theory.
Yeah.
You know, how can you really say 100% certainty that this works?
You wouldn't give somebody your car keys if they've only got their theory test passed, would you?
Yeah, exactly. This is it.
Go on, take it for a spin.
You know, it's like, who would you want? Let's say you got a leak in your house, right? Would you want a guy who's just left college, who's learnt it all in a textbook, or do you want the guy who never went to college but has been doing it 20 years? That's who you want, right?
No brainer.
I want a guy with experience.
Yeah, totally. And if someone's lived it, immediately they've got the respect.
Yeah.
Especially if you've overcome some heavy shit and you've spun it 180. And then to go the extra mile, not just spun it 180 and sorted your own life out, you're dedicated yourself to turn other people's lives around. That's the magic.
Yeah, and this is it. And that's what I wanted to do, mate. Because look, I look out there even now, look, being sober is cool, working on yourself is cool. That's all great. And that's great. That's the truth. Let's hold this truth as well. And there's a lot of idiots out there running events, wanting to be leaders, self-proclaimed shamans, gurus, right? With no life experience, running events, proclaiming to transform lives, you know, dressed up as like, you know, bloody feathers in their hair and, you know, spiritual buzzwords. And it's like, come on, what is happening?
No one's going to relate to that crap.
It's just like we're taking these tools that I believe should be free, and we're, like everything in the West, we're putting a price tag on it and selling it on the shelf.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
You've been sober 17 years.
Yeah, 17 years now, yeah.
Do you still identify or consider yourself an addict?
So I would, you know, occasionally I go to meetings and I would say, you know, my name's Michael, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Michael, I'm an addict. It doesn't make up fully my identity, but I also don't have any problem with saying my name's Michael, I'm an alcoholic.
I tell you why.
I know some people do though.
Yeah, I tell you why I asked that question, because I believe addicts are some of the best people. They're the most committed people. They will finish tasks. They won't fuck around. And when they get a glimmer of something to be grateful for, they get addicted to that. You can really, really push addiction in a completely different direction. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think people don't like the stigma of being called an addict. Have you become addicted to saving people?
It's a great question, you know, and it's a question that me and my wife have spoke about as well, you know.
What a great addiction.
Well, you know, yes and no. So if my identity and my self-worth is wrapped up in how many people I save, how many lives I can touch, then it's a bad thing. So whereas my identity should really be wrapped in the impact I have on my family. Like, and how do you measure that? Well, I believe the way you measure that is if my wife and kids were sitting here and Liam asked them, what's Michael like when these cameras aren't on a rainy Sunday afternoon when he's stressed out and overwhelmed? What's he really like? What comes out of their mouth is how you should judge Michael.
Yeah.
You know, not what I say here on this podcast. It's like, how am I actually showing up for the ones that I love? You know, so it's a good question. It's a good question that you ask. And it's something that I ponder with. And I think I've probably been right on the line at times, you know, but I'd like to believe that it comes from a place of having suffered so much myself, wanting to help others who are suffering, you know, but sometimes I would probably admit I've probably got that wrong. I've done too much when I should have done a bit more for me and my family.
Yeah, I get all that. So I want to talk about the prison service as a whole. Then and now, maybe, where it's gone wrong, how it can improve, what prisons are actually like on a day-to-day basis, and where you come in. But within that, I also want you to talk about your charity where, you know, you've dealt with victims of grooming gangs, and also within this whole prison journey and your charity, you get to see some shocking things. You get to see things firsthand, what people read in the news about, and it won't really affect them. So you've also got to protect your own energy. It's a very loaded question, but I know that you know what I mean.
Yes.
And just run with it, and I'll just take it all in so I can learn what the prison system's like and how you would change it, because you've got a very, very good perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to go on this. And I think one thing I would like to prepare your listeners for is try and hold two things that are true at the same time. Because it's easy to go into this conversation thinking this is the truth and that's the only truth. And yes, it is true, and some other stuff's true as well. And so it's just I'm going to try and invite us to hold two truths at the same time.
And I'm going to sit back and just listen.
Yeah, sure.
That's all I'm going to do.
So we started running prison workshops really properly back in 2018. I'd done a fair bit in there through speaking, through AA and NA, but really it was the creation of the tools that changed my life, taking that into the prisons. It was done purely because the reoffending rate is so high. So for those who don't know, if you go to prison in the UK currently, there's a 75% chance you'll return to prison within 10 years. So what does that mean? That means if you run your own business, that business actually fails 75% of the time. That's our current prison system. It fails 75% of the time. Other statistics indicate that 90% of inmates have suffered some form of trauma, physical, mental, emotional, sexual. So what does that mean? It means that the most traumatized members of our society all end up in the same place. Where is that? Your prison, your local prison. You want to find the most traumatized members of society? Go to your local prison. What's the solution for them? Well, currently, we've got a solution that fails 75% of the time, where inmates are locked up for 23 hours a day. During lockdown, they were locked up for 23 and a half hours every day. So rehabilitation is non-existent. It's very rare. And the way we try and break it is not through lecturing and trying to speak from an elevated place where we've got all the answers. We go in with lived experience. This is where we've been. This is what we've been through. Some of the most difficult things I've seen have been working with the sex offenders. I've worked with Aylesbury, Brixton, Swinfen Hall. Swinfen Hall, I would say, was probably some of the most difficult sex offenders I've seen. And it's a part of this job that is very difficult to do, because when you offer services to a prison, you can't dictate that, no, I'm not willing to work with them type of offenders. You probably could, but it would likely lead to other complications. You know, it's an interesting thing, this subject, because all of the inmates from other crimes, right from murder right down to theft, I would say 99% of them want change, and they want to change their lives. The area of sexual offences is a very different landscape altogether, where, you know, up to, I would say, 30% don't want to be reformed and actually can't be reformed. Then that leaves another area of people who have suffered such excruciatingly painful sexual abuse as children themselves, they've normalised certain behaviours, like the sexualisation of young children. They've normalised it because that's all they knew, similar to my uncle, right? Then you've got another category that have come from different parts of the world where sexualising children is actually normal. It's part of their culture. It's not frowned upon, and it's something that's done normally, just like how us here in the UK might go for a pint on a Friday night. For them, they do things in other ways. And so when you come into the prison system and you work with these sex offenders, really, I've seen this more prevalent in the past 7 years. The room's kind of divided up into these sections. You've got, I would say, 30-40% from foreign people, immigrants who've come here from a different culture, who've normalised sexual offences. Then you've got, I would say, 40% of them who are actually white British men, and there's a whole mixture of different things in them. And then you've got, you know, the 20% who are, I believe, real wrong-uns. They can't be changed. They can't be changed. And it's really sad to say this, because I've written a book saying change is possible, and sadly, it's not possible for everyone. There are some people who there is something that is not right. And so, look, you know, when you look at there's a lot of stuff now about the grooming gangs, all right, and we've seen a lot of this in the news, and yes, what they're doing is horrific, right? And yes, they should be punished. And remember the two truths thing, right? Remember what I said. All of that is bad and it should be punished. That's one truth. I'm going to give you another truth now. And with a lot of them that I've worked with, They are deeply remorseful. They have come to this country unaware that our culture is different. There's been a missing piece. There's been a missing educational piece from our government to say, when you come here, we do not sexualize or have sexual intercourse with children. It's something we do not do. So does that make me feel sorry for them? No, it doesn't. In my eyes, it's still wrong what you've done, and you deserve to be punished for it. However, two truths at the same time, there's a failing by the government. There's been people let into this country from a very different culture who've committed crimes that, from what I've seen, having worked in the prisons, they're largely unaware of, because they've come from a culture where it's normalised into cities in the UK that are full of other people of the same culture as them, where it's normalised, and then now they're in prison and they're confused. You know, it doesn't make it okay. I'm not saying it's okay, but what I'm seeing is at some point he hasn't been given that information. Whose fault is that? Is that on us, the members of the public? Of course it's not. It's on the government to really educate these people before they come in. But also the flip side of this, and this is the more, I would say, uncomfortable truth, is that only makes up 40% of the sex offenders that I've seen in the prisons I've worked in. The other 40% are white British men. Some of the more perverse and sick sexual offenders I've seen have been the ones who identify as different genders, have like different coloured hair. They're the ones when you normally look into a room and you look for the ones that can't be reformed, that don't want to change, that have no remorse, they're normally the ones. To give you an example, and I'm sorry to share this, but I'm going to share it for your listeners, just to understand. This was a workshop. I won't say the prison. It's not fair to say the prison. I was running a workshop in a prison, and there was a young man there. He was only in his, I'd say, early 20s, identified as a woman, had long purple hair, and one of the things we do in the workshop is try to trace back the source of our original trauma, because if we can identify that, we can start identifying the things that we've normalised. So, for instance, for me, like what I shared earlier, I took my sadness, put it away. I normalised that you don't show your sadness. For someone who's been sexually abused, they might normalise that it's okay to have sex with children. On this occasion, we came to the point around the room where everyone was quite receptive, and we got to the young man who identified as a woman, had purple hair, and his answer was, "I've never been a victim of sexual abuse, and I've always been the perpetrator, and I will always be the perpetrator." And you know, that workshop finished, and he sat there throughout. Really, he was there to tick a box, because when you attend our workshops, it goes towards, it looks good on you, basically. So we do get some inmates attend just for that reason. We got to the end of that workshop, and I looked over to a couple of the prison officers, and I said, "That inmate, how long has that inmate got left?" And she said to me, "He's got 18 months left. 18 months, that man is going to be walking the streets of the UK. He has no remorse. He's a predator." And it's really hard to not share this story. And I share it with you, right? Because to give a balanced perspective of what is going on in the prisons, but also to make this final point. That man I'm describing got sentenced to less time in prison than other men who've been convicted of possession of cocaine. So normal people who are convicted of having a gram of cocaine are getting more time in prison than dangerous sexual offenders. And so, you know, when you look at all of this, right, and this is another hard, uncomfortable truth about this, and I was really cautious about sharing this because, you know, I don't want any backlash from me and my family, but when you look at what's a common theme amongst these people. Sadly, and it's very sad, but I'm just going to say it, religion is at the heart of a lot of this. It's really sad that somehow people within these religions are hiding behind it and committing such atrocious crimes. I've been working in prisons for the best part of 17 years. This is what I've seen. And this is, again, to give a more balanced view on it, right? I've got a couple of friends who are Muslims, and I've got some friends who are Christians, right? Both of them, both groups of friends who are Christians and Muslims, both of them can identify within the texts of these books, there's some pretty gnarly stuff. You look in the Old Testament of the Bible, right? There's some crazy stuff, right? And both of them, the Christians realize, yeah, that's crazy. We've got to move on. And some of my Muslim friends realize, yeah, of course, that stuff's crazy. It worked back then. It doesn't work now. However, with people who have kind of still practiced that religion and have moved on, there is a group, not just in Islam, but also in Christianity and the various branches of Christianity, you know, the Catholic Church, Jehovah's Witnesses and all of that, right? That literally take what's written as this is how we must behave in 2025. And I think that's where the danger is.
This is where you get your radicals.
Yeah, that's what I would call it. Yeah, and it's dangerous, you know. And I don't want to, you know, I've got a family and kids. I don't want my family and kids to be in danger. But I also want to share the truth because my daughters, I've got 3 daughters. They're growing up in this world too. You know, like so. I kind of have a duty of care to tell the truth.
I feel we're obligated to say it exactly as it is.
Yeah.
Predominantly, if you're an independent sex case in the UK, the chances are, I mean, obviously the fact we're a white British country by default stands to reason that the vast majority of independent paedophiles in the UK are going to be white British middle-aged men. And being a white middle-aged man myself, I want to call these people out. I won't be taking umbrage or trying to divert the truth. It's like, no, these people exist. They need to be called out. They need to be sent to jail. They need to be aired out to dry for everybody to see so that nobody goes near them again. But also in the same breath, with the whole grooming gang scandal, that predominantly the gangs are of Pakistani heritage that prescribe to Islam. The gangs do. So you've got independents and you've got gangs. And I can't see why people struggle to speak about both. It's like, well, facts aren't racist. Stats don't lie and stats don't prejudice, and they're not Islamophobic. They are what they are. And I think I think the name of the game for me is I would like to see more people call out their own community. And I feel like, well, if I start the trend, like I've testified against my own father, I will call my own out. If you do wrong, you hurt a child, or you could possibly put them in any kind of danger or cause trauma, I will call you out. So I like to think that if I call out my own community, other people may think I'm going to do the same.
Yeah.
And then that eradicates people from different communities calling it out, because then there's no argument. You can't say, well, give somebody a label for calling out an obvious crime, because we just need to deal with, poor behaviour needs to be called out across the board.
It does, yeah. And look, this is really what we're talking about, Liam. We're talking about good versus evil.
Yes.
That's really what it is, because look, the flip side of this, which I think is important for your listeners to hear, is we also work with survivors. So here's the work in the prisons dealing with the perpetrators, but we also work with survivors. So we've worked with survivors who've been trafficked across the world, and we've worked with survivors who've escaped, not just the Catholic Church, but different Christian churches as well. And some of that is, I would say, just as horrific as what goes on in the sex trafficking around the world. There was a woman we worked with who was married into the Jehovah's Witnesses at a young age, married into a marriage with a man that she didn't love, who was physically abusive, sexually abusive, would rape her. She also had to work to pay the bills, And when she got home, she had to cook, clean for him as well. That was her life for 20 plus years. He used to spit on her, beat her up, rape her. And the rule within the Jehovah's Witnesses was if you leave, you're disowned by the community. You can't divorce. If you divorce, you're disowned. They don't want to know you. This woman went to her mum and dad, pleaded for their support to leave this man. And they said, if you leave him, you're disowned, not only from the church, but from our whole community. She found the courage to eventually leave him and came to our charity. She's been with our charity for 5 or 6 years now. And luckily, she's got people around her. However, her mum, her sister, all her friends have not spoken to her once.
Because they're all Jehovah's Witnesses.
Because they're all still in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Mm. So, this systematic abuse and rape of women isn't just exclusive to the grooming gangs. It's happening within the Catholic Church, it's happening within Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's happening within Islam. We worked with another young woman who, and this story is really sad, just preparing your viewers for this. She immigrated here from Afghanistan. She was sold by her father to her uncle at the age of 6. At the age of 6, she was taken by her uncle, and her first experience was thrown into a room and raped by her uncle. She was forced to marry him. She eventually immigrated here with him to the UK, where they were married, they had children, and eventually, through the help of living in the UK, she was able to leave him, and she came to our charity. What she detailed to us was the same as what the woman from Jehovah's Witnesses detailed. Years and years of physical abuse, sexual abuse. She had to do everything to provide for the family. And so what am I seeing here? So what am I seeing? I'm seeing crimes committed under the name of religion. I'm seeing a government that has failed us massively on so many fronts. I'm seeing a government that has gone overseas, it committed wars overseas, and traumatised members of them societies have come here. It done the same to my mum in Ireland. Ireland was under British rule for 700 years. After they left, loads of people immigrated here. My mum immigrated here. My mum was an immigrant here. My mum came here as a traumatised woman. Now we've got loads of traumatised people landing on our shores. The prisons are full of traumatised people. What's the end game here? Well, this is what I think. A traumatised society is very easy to control, because remember with the statistic I said earlier, 90% of inmates have experienced some form of trauma. So if you've experienced trauma, you're either going to end up in prison or you're going to end up addicted to either hard drugs or prescribed medication. In both circumstances, someone's getting paid, the pharmaceutical companies and the government, because the prison is a business. People get paid off prisons. You know that, right? And so does the pharmaceutical companies. By keeping a society and a population sick and traumatized, they're so easy to control and manipulate. They've got no space to think about anything else apart from survival. They're stuck in survival mode. And so what do we need? I wish that reform and Nigel Farage would come and wave the magic wand. My experience is that white, well-educated men have not fixed this problem. I personally believe that we need a revolution to fix this broken system and try and unite everyone under one banner, where it's not about race, religion. It's about good versus evil. What side are you on? Do you stand for the protection of the vulnerable? Are you up for protecting the women and the children? If you're up for protecting them, I believe that's a good side. If you want to hurt them, rape them, abuse them, now you're my enemy. You're the enemy of this new society we're trying to build. And I think adequate punishments need to be put in place. Like what I spoke about, 20, 30% of them sex offenders, they're never going to change. They don't want to change, Liam. And they're going to come out and they're going to hurt young children at some point. I think the whole system needs taken down and starting again. That's what I believe. And the reason I wrote this final book, Change is Possible, The 7 Stages to Healing Trauma, is because I believe if I can help heal the trauma, it can wake people up. If they're not stuck in survival mode and they've got their eyes fully open, now they can see things. They can really see around what's going on for them. And if we can wake society up, we can all come together as one. Because like I said, there's good Christians and there's good Muslims and there's good members of our society. We need all of them to come together. And I think that the time we have is now. I think if it goes on any longer, I think it's going to be, the darkness will consume us.
It's got to be now. The magnifying glass is on so many different things at the moment. There's really nowhere to hide. It's now time to rise and do it in an intelligent manner, peacefully, but words are powerful. So use them. Use them for change. Call your own communities out. Call out poor behaviour, no matter who it's from. And I'm so glad. So 2 things I want to say from what I was just taking in. Thank God there's men like you out there that have got that balance. So you're not extreme one way or the other. You're fair and you're balanced, and you come at it from a place of love and concern. The world needs more people like that. That is for sure. And the fact that you get the whole good versus evil thing is, I'm with you on that. But the good really need to find some strength to call out the evil without fear of retribution. They really, really do, which is why I think Christian values need to be restored in the UK. I'm not saying become a member of the God Squad, but you can at least take a few little bits and pieces. Love your neighbour, support the weak. I mean, the elderly going cold this winter has just been heartbreaking when you actually think about it. You know, what kind of an act is that? If that's not an act of evil, cutting the winter fuel allowance, for example, and you say the government have failed, they haven't just failed us, they're beaten us senseless. It's appalling. And also, it's only right to mention my inner thoughts with the current grooming gang scandal at the moment. I am delighted that Elon Musk has got his torch out and lit up that whole scandal. Everyone's now talking about it, not just in the UK, but worldwide. Now the Americans are calling us out. Why on earth has this been allowed to go on for so many years? So the fact people are now talking about grooming gangs and who are predominantly responsible for the gangs, I'm delighted. But I also don't want so much attention on them that the lone wolf degenerate gets away because he's floating under the radar and he's abusing children and other groups, other religious cults. I want the light shone on every community, every individual. Now that it's out there and we're talking about it, let's expose everybody and set these future children free from the trauma that awaits them if it's ignored any longer.
Yeah. And I think it's right.
Same page?
Yeah, 100%, mate. And there's one thing that I think would be worth sharing here for any parents who have children, because we do work with young people as well. Keep them away from their phones for as long as you can. That would be my greatest bit of advice. The young people we've worked with who have been abused have all been groomed online. Gaming platforms. There's a website called Reddit, which they discuss gaming strategies. Social media. All these platforms, right? When a kid's got a phone, all the kids who've come to us who've been raped and abused, they've been groomed through the phone. They were given a phone too young.
Some people, they're so bogged down with their own day-to-day tasks that it's very easy just to say, there's your iPad, there's your phone, don't bother me. I mean, and then you're letting essentially strangers into your house.
Yeah, well, this is it. And look, kids can still have phones, but there's settings you can set on them. You can stop people from sending friend requests, and you can set healthy boundaries with children. So, for instance, one of the most safest boundaries you can set for a child, if they have a phone, they never give out their personal information. You never tell anyone on your phone your address, where you go to school, where you are, where you live. You never tell them anything. That's the key bit of information with the sexual offenders we've worked with, is that they build up to. So another interesting thing for you to consider if you're a parent is the sex offenders we've worked with, when we speak to them, one of the things they look for fatherless homes. They look for homes where there's no father. If there's no father, there's no threat. If you're a dad, this is a hard one. I'm not suggesting all dads stay in really dysfunctional relationships, but if you're a dad, know when you leave, you're putting that child at every statistical disadvantage. Kids who grow up in fatherless homes are more likely to become addicted to drugs, more likely to become groomed, more likely to commit suicide, more likely to end up in prison. When you walk out that door, you're putting that kid at every statistical disadvantage. And I know it because I work with them in the prisons and I work with the perpetrators of the crimes on these kids. So stay. If you're a dad, for God's sake, do the work on yourself and stay for the sake of your kids.
For people listening to this, nodding their head, agreeing, and want to find out more of what you've got to offer, where can people find you and where can they purchase your books?
Yeah, so the books are available everywhere. Amazon is probably your easiest bet. And you can go to my website.
We'll put the links to your socials in our description as well.
Yeah, we're a non-profit organisation. If you want to support the work we do, you can claim gift aid back on the website. There's a donate button. And if you need support, you just come and get the support. You don't have to pay for anything. We have weekly online calls. You can access it anywhere in the UK, and we have monthly events. And if you've got an inmate, a friend or a family member who's an inmate in prison, we work in, I think it's nearly 14, 15 different prisons across the UK now. So tell them to look out for us, because we're going in and we're actually giving them the tools to actually change their life. It's not just like some, excuse my language, bullshit course that's just ticking a box. We're actually saying, listen, this is what you got to do to change. And it's not easy, I get up in people's face a little bit because, I think some people need it, especially some inmates need it,
Accountability.
Yeah. It's like, take some ownership of your life. Stop blaming everyone. I had every reason under the sun to blame why my life was a mess. That wasn't going to get me nowhere. I need someone to get in my face. What are you going to do about it, mate?
You like the Full Metal Jacket of rehabilitation.
Yes. But you know what, mate? It's like, it's a gift, mate. I didn't, when someone done it to me, I thought, cheeky fucker. I look back now, I'm like, thank God he had the balls to do that to me.
You took it home with you.
Yeah.
But to round this off on something chirpy.
Yeah, go for it.
And I appreciate it's never easy rehashing and reliving stuff that you want to sort of leave in the past, but I can see that you're well aware of how powerful all that trauma is to bring it to the surface to then help ease other people's pain. So yeah, nothing but respect from me, and I absolutely tip my hat to you. But for anyone that's struggling out there, what would you say to somebody that is close to getting their liberty taken away?
Our organisation works with everyone. People struggling with addiction, even if you're just struggling with mental health, right? And our slogan is connection is medicine, right? And one thing I will say, having been an ex-lone wolf, I was a lone wolf. I didn't let nobody in. And it does not work. You need to let people in. Find a community of salt of the earth people, like we got at CIP, people who've been through some shit and who found a way out. Get in with them and stay. Stay even when people challenge you on your bullshit. All right? Because they've probably got something really valuable for you. So stay when it gets hard. But the biggest lesson would be come and get connected, get reconnected, come back into community. A lot of people I meet, they're out there on their own for years and years, battling on their own. It's like, just come back in. This ain't got an entry fee at the gate. Just come back in. And we're not a group of therapists and know-it-alls. We're people who've been through it. And I think that would be my biggest call. I wish when I come out of prison, there was something like this for me.
Yeah.
Everything like this I had to pay for. And now I've set this thing up where you don't have to pay. So take advantage of it. There's no excuse now for some people. When I think about it, it's like AA is free, NA is free, CIP is free. It's like, if you're still there, know that that's what you're choosing. You're choosing your own suffering, and you can choose something different any day of the week.
I hope that reaches the right ear holes, and it probably will, because this has got a decent reach, this platform, which I'm very proud of, because I get the opportunity to sit opposite men like you that have made a change and want to help other people better themselves. And Paul Denan was sat opposite me only a few months ago. May he rest in peace. What a beautiful soul. And he touched base on betterment. And he said, allow people the opportunity to change and better themselves. And I watched that back from our conversation. It really choked me up, because we all deserve a nice life. And it's thanks to people like you that are putting the tools in place and passing the baton of strength over to people that may just save a life or two. And I'll round this up as a mark of gratitude. I want to say that 17 years of sobriety has done you a real good turn, because you look very fresh, very fit, very well, and you've got your shit together. You make me want to give up drinking.
Oh dear.
And what I will say is, you mentioned that connection is medicine.
Yeah.
Well, I've had mine today, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Liam. Thanks for having me on, mate. You're a good man.
And you, good
God
health,
bless
brother.
you, mate.
Cheers,
God
mate.
bless you.